Hello, everyone. It's Sinéad Whelehan, and welcome back to Barbara School with Barbara Lamb. This is a series of interviews, as you probably already know, but I'm going to say it anyway, about Barbara's absolutely fascinating life and all the personal experiences that she's had that have led her onto the path that she's currently on now, with all of the experience and wisdom that she's gained through her practice as a hypnotherapist, as a therapist, regression therapist, many things. She has been a dance and movement therapist. She has had a variety of extraordinary experiences herself. And within making our way through all of these things in this series of interviews. So today is episode 10. And today we're talking about a concept called dual identity. So first of all, I just want to say hi to Barbara and welcome her into the episode this evening.
All of you and Sinead, nice to be with you again.
Yes, it's always great to do this. I'm really happy we're doing this. And this topic is intriguing because I was very surprised to learn from you just the other day that you have had a really high number of female patients who have had the experience of dual identity, meaning that they feel like they are, living their human life when they're awake, but that when they're asleep, they are someone else doing something else, sometimes off planet. And that was fascinating to hear because I've met people here and there, in my own exploring in this field, who have had the experience of feeling like there's something else going on at night. I'm doing something at night. I just don't remember what it is. And I realized that I myself have had that experience. And this could be, maybe I'm making it up. I don't know. All I know is that it doesn't feel like I'm making it up. It feels like it's a natural experience that has arisen as a pattern of experience that I've had for many years. And that has been that I will wake up in the morning and I feel like I've been busy and I've been doing something at night. I have the distinct feeling of having done stuff, whatever it is, and I just can't remember. And it's almost that feeling like I've just woken from a dream, and I want to remember the dream. And as I'm trying to remember it, it's slipping further and further away. So you said that the other day, that was really interesting to me. And so it's a topic I'm very curious about. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and have you share them with the audience that's so dedicated to your work to share, what the experiences you've had with several patients, several clients of yours who've had this experience.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I have definitely talked to other people who say what you have just said, that at least on many nights, not every night, but many nights, they feel, when they wake up in the morning, they feel like they've been doing something very busily. They've been really involved. And that's different than when they wake up from a dream and clearly remember that it was a dream. There's a difference. And you probably feel that difference too. So it may be that many more of us, without our realizing it, are having those experiences of at least our astral self, our consciousness is going someplace else and being very busy doing something. Not necessarily the physical body go, but we all have that ability to leave our bodies. And some of us are conscious of that happening during the daytime. I've had a number of those, which I think I've already spoken about in our discussions. But so I think that some people are doing that at nighttime and we're very involved. They're not just flying around. I mean, they really seem to be someplace else and really doing something, like almost as if they have a different job or a different task, a different mission, doing something. But still, that category that we're just talking about is different than what I want to bring out today, which is, as you have said, dual identity. Well, I never heard of such a thing. In fact, I think I have coined that term, dual identity, because back in the 1990s, I was working with a man in regression, and we did quite a number of regressions over a period of several years. And in the regressions, it came out that when he was a little boy and all through his boyhood and teenage years, he was having these experiences of being taken to a particular ship at night and with a particular being, kind of a mentor being,
Mhm.
a male, sort of a gray 7 foot, 5'7" tall, grayish sort of being, very nice being. My client really liked him very much and accepted that he was having experiences with him, although he didn't necessarily remember it consciously
Mhm.
until he started doing regressions when he was in his middle age years. But anyway, he would be taken again and again in his growing up years, and he would be stood in front of what appeared to him to be a blue column, but it was actually a blue beam of light that was very, very dense and appeared to him to be like a tall column running from the floor of the craft that he was in up through the ceiling. And he would be stood in front of that, a foot or so away from it, and he would beam thoughts to this beam. And then there would always be a couple of beings on his right side and a couple of beings on his left side. And they would be looking at him and reading his thoughts as he was beaming thoughts to this beam. So all of this was for training him to eventually pilot that ship.
Oh my goodness.
And he knew that he was being trained for that, and that was okay.
Okay.
So it's an amazing thing because every single thought that he thought while he was looking toward the beam, every single thought really, really counted, and it had to be disciplined. It had to be focused completely on which direction he wanted that ship to move in, like up or down or accelerate, decelerate, curve to the left, curve to the right, whatever way he wanted the ship to go. He would have to give that direction just like in a one word direction. And the beings, on each side, looking at him and picking up his thoughts, they would keep interrupting him, saying, "No, no, go back to the direction. No, that's an extra thought. No, don't think about that." Because, as he was doing this as a kid, sometimes he'd think everyday things. A kid might think like, "Oh, gee, I wonder when I can get out of here," or "I wonder what we're having for dinner tonight," or "I wonder if I can get some bubble gum on the way home." You know,
Pick up dry cleaning. Remember to feed the dog. Yeah.
right? Just those everyday things that a kid would think, or, "Oh, I've got to get my homework done."
Mm.
And so, I hope this won't take too long. I've got to get my homework done. So the beings would say, "No, no, go back to the beam, go back to the beam, clear your thought, no extra thoughts."
Oh.
And so he learned that over a period of years, and during all those years when he was growing up, many times every year, he would be taken for this training. Well, eventually, when we got to some of the experiences that he'd had as an adult, he had one experience where he realized that he was not only an adult piloting the ship, he felt it was the same ship that he'd been trained on, but we don't really know.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, here he was on a UFO piloting the ship, and he was an extraterrestrial being.
How did he know that?
Well, I had him look down at himself
Oh
as
my,
he was piloting the ship. You know, I wondered, it was something that he was saying that made me think, wow, I wonder about this. And so he looked down at himself and, oh, yes, I've got grayish skin and got this tight fitting suit on. And anyway, he felt I had him feel his head, and he didn't have any hair. And, he just obviously was a different kind of being. He was the kind of being who had been training him.
wow. And that's a regression technique, isn't it? When you get someone to look down at their own body and describe what they're wearing and so on.
Yes,
Was that
yes.
the first time you ever heard someone describe themselves as an ET?
Um, I think it was. I think so. Yeah. It's hard to remember with all the regressions I've done. But
Yes.
anyway, yes, I think he was the first one. And that was absolutely amazing to me. I had never heard of that before, of someone living a life as a human being here on planet Earth, and also on some occasions having morphed into an extraterrestrial being and functioning there in the way that they function. The way it all began with him, the reason he originally came for regressions was that here on Earth in his regular life, he was walking along in a town one day, and he went past the window of a hobby shop, and he looked in the window just as he was walking along. Ah, and he noticed that there was a box and a model of a UFO. And he not only was surprised that it was a UFO, but he was surprised that it was the kind of UFO that he knew. And he said, "Oh, that's a sport model. I want to get one of those. I know that one really well." And then he sort of caught himself and said, "What? How do I know? How do I know that? I don't I
Oh,
don't understand, but I just know that I want that model in my home." So he went and bought it. And then he began thinking about that more, and his wife began thinking about that. How come you knew that? This was back in the 1990s, by the way, before there was a lot of information out and around about UFOs. So anyway, he and his wife, kept thinking about that. Why is that so familiar? Why do you think you know that model of UFOs when most people don't even think there are such a thing as UFOs? So
right.
uh so anyway, that got his curiosity. That is what inspired him to find me for doing regressions with. And then many of these other details that I have mentioned about going every year and being trained to pilot the ship with his mind. Now, at that time in the 1990s, he didn't know, and I didn't know, that it's a very, very common thing
Yes.
extraterrestrials to fly a craft primarily with their minds.
I was just thinking that. I just read
Yeah.
another experiencer's account. Yeah, you didn't know that at the time. I think I remember you saying that during an earlier conversation we had. And just the other day, I read an account by an experiencer who said that that's
Ah,
how it worked, right? That they had been taught. I think it was Ron Johnson actually. Um,
okay.
he might have mentioned it, or there was a quote from him or something where he mentioned that, and it reminded me of how common an aspect of that experience is. So please go on. This is in the 1990s. This is the first time you've heard this that you recall. Uh-huh.
Yes. And then also, it was right around that time in the 1990s that a woman came for regressions. And it turned out she didn't know it beforehand, before coming to me, but We had quite a few sessions together. Some of them were just talking sessions. And we pieced it together that she must be a walk-in. She had done the soul exchange with
Uh,
a woman who didn't really want to be here. And this one came from an extraterrestrial realm as a male extraterrestrial and did the soul exchange with a human woman
oh,
and, you know, resumed life working here. And so we did some work on that and how the soul exchange happened and how she happened to choose that woman to do the soul exchange with. It was totally voluntary. And then she was in a relationship, a personal relationship, and her partner came in one of those sessions and validated that that particular night when the soul exchange happened, the partner was right there. It happened during the night when they were both asleep.
uh,
But the partner was aware that something was going on with this woman and woke up and just witnessed. Well, it wasn't a whole lot to see, but the one who left the body was saying goodbye to her partner and like goodbye and thanks for everything. You know, and then the new one came in and they all went back to sleep. Well, the new one, the walk-in and the partner went back to sleep and this resumed life the next morning, except that the new one, the walk-in, looked the same,
uh-huh.
but was definitely a different personality. Anyway, that was just another very interesting and important thing to realize about that woman who came to me. But as time went on and we had a few more sessions, um, she it came out and she realized for the first time consciously that on occasion she would leave her, so this is the walk-in woman, she
Mm,
would leave the body, usually at night, but sometimes in the daytime. She worked from home and her partner went away
okay.
to work. So sometimes she was home alone in the daytime in their home. And anyway, she realized that on some occasions she would leave her body and go and be on a spacecraft as the male ET that she used to be. And she would be piloting a ship.
So was this like a parallel reality then? Because if that being had already come into her body, okay,
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So that was very extraordinary from my point of view. So not only going and being a different being, but even changing gender.
Hmm.
The first situation, it was he was a man here, and he was a male pilot. Um, oh, and back to the first one again, being the male pilot, uh, ET pilot. He was not only flying his own ship, which was one of these sport models that he recognized in the hobby shop window, um, but he was a commander of a fleet of 7 ships,
Okay.
7 UFOs. So they must have all been incredibly connected somehow consciously, because when he would give the thought to accelerate or rise or descend or turn or whatever, all 7 ships responded to that command immediately.
That's interesting.
Not only his own ship, I have never heard of that
Oh,
anywhere else. I've heard of you know, piloting the ship with thought,
yes.
but I've never heard of it, of the thought of one ship and one pilot being able to affect six other ships instantly with
Hmm.
no lapse of even a few seconds.
Yeah.
He would say, you know, rise, his ship would rise, and all seven ships would rise,
Wow.
you know, decelerate, whatever. So that's just amazing that can apparently happen.
Yes. I mean, I can't say I've heard it described that specifically before, but I think I've heard of the concept of a fleet, which would make sense because if the ship is being controlled by the consciousness of the pilot, then the ship itself is conscious, I would assume, in some way or another, whether it's AI or not, or bioorganism. So then it would make sense that all of the other ships that are part of its fleet would be sharing something of the same consciousness. Like, to me, that makes sense. So I might have just assumed when I've heard other stories that would be the case. Maybe I haven't actually heard a story quite like that, but that's an amazing amount of detail.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely amazing.
Wow.
You see how interesting this work is for me, as
Mhm.
well as being interesting. And the main point is to be interesting and helpful for the person. But some of this is really just dazzling for me. I mean, I've just learned so much from these people who are having these experiences. And it seems to be very gratifying, very helpful for them to get the details up into their conscious awareness. Whereas before they have the regression, they might have had a sense that, gee, kind of seems like something happened last night, but they have no idea what. And so it seems to be, you know, very meaningful and helpful for them to realize
Yeah.
what they had actually been doing.
So then,
The,
are they then able to consciously remember after they've had that session with you? Does it
yeah,
break them through in some way? Like, now they're able to remember what happens at night?
it opens up a lot. Yes, that for them to be aware of, whereas before they just didn't even know there was such a thing.
Wow. Okay, that's fascinating. What's the next one? You said you have a bunch of these. What is I
Yeah,
want to
well, I have a couple more. Um, One is that, and this was a woman much more recently, and she realized in her regression that she was leaving her body and going out there somewhere. It seems to be in a different dimension. And she said that she is a member of and working with a group called the Council of Nine. Now, these are not human beings. They're um, we would categorize them as extraterrestrial beings who are in another dimension. But that happens to be a very high consciousness council, the Council of Nine. I've heard of that before meeting this woman. I've heard of that for many years, the Council of Nine, but I don't know a whole lot of details about that. But anyway, she goes out there and in her astral form and is very involved and has been for all of her adult years of her life. And then she comes back here and wakes up the next morning and goes on about her life. But she too, like you, Sinead, um, has that sense sometimes that, whoa, she's really been busy. You know, just that night she just woke up from. And anyway, she was very pleased to realize that she was part of the Council of Nine because that's a very high consciousness, spiritually oriented group working for the good in the universe. And she, here in her life on Earth, has been feeling like she's here to work for the good, to be helping with healing and advising, counseling people, encouraging people, working for peacefulness and good relationships among people, whatever she can, to really bring about good things here on the earth. And so she's doing it with the Council of Nine also in a more universal way, helping not only humans, but helping beings of many kinds throughout the galaxy with that Council of Nine. So that was wonderful. And of course, to be a member of that council, she had to be one of them, which means that she changed into that form of being, and not being there with her human body, her human identity.
Okay.
Much more encompassing than that.
I've got a question then. So if the guy who was trained for many years to become a pilot of the ship and then the fleet, he was able to be human, and sorry, not him, the walk-in one. So the walk-in was able to be the male ET in the female body, but also be the male ET whenever it chose to. It sounded like perhaps it that life and wanted to revisit it. But then what about this situation where for example, the guy who was trained to be a pilot for many years, and then this most recent case that you're mentioning now, they were not walk-ins, they were human, and then at night they were another being. So is that still them, or is that another parallel reality? How would you explain that kind of experience? Because it doesn't sound quite like astral travel. It sounds a bit different than that.
Yes. Well, I think we have to realize that the person is really an expression of the soul.
Right. Okay.
In other words, the soul is the ongoing, continuing entity, and the soul can incarnate sometimes as a human, very possibly many, many, many times as a human being, one lifetime after the other. And the soul can have many lifetimes incarnating as what we would call an extraterrestrial, or even a number of different extraterrestrial species from lifetime to lifetime. So all of this is very normal, I think. But the unusual thing in my perception so far, learning about these things only through the regressions I do with real people, is the unusual thing is that they can be primarily aware of living their life. That soul chose to have them live a life as a human, but they can also, the same soul can also be another kind of being elsewhere,
simultaneously,
even in another dimension.
Okay.
So the soul, I think, is so much more than what we have been aware of.
Yes.
I always thought, until getting into this work, I always thought that each of us has a soul. And then I gradually began to realize, a few decades ago, that the soul is what we basically are. And then sort of incidentally, or I should say, for short durations of time, relatively, we come into a lifetime as a human on Earth. And that was the extent of my understanding until the 1990s, when I began to work with some of these people and realized that they had really walked in, done a soul exchange, and that some of them came from a spiritual realm and did the exchange, and some of them came from the extraterrestrial realm and did the soul exchange.
Got it. Okay.
As in the case of these two people I've been mentioning who piloted the ships, so it would be kind of like a parallel life, except that there was a point in time when they came here to work. So in this one lifetime, you can be here and you can be that other being if your soul so chooses.
Got it. Yeah. That makes
It's,
sense to me. That makes sense to me. I mean,
yeah,
there's a growing understanding that we're all part of one enormous something, universe, consciousness, the one, the source, whatever people call it. So if it, and even in religious people say God is in all of us. So
yeah,
seem to innately have this understanding that we have consciousness, but our consciousness is connected to something much greater. So it makes sense to me that if it's already non-local, and we know from remote viewing and astral travel that consciousness is non-local as well, it makes sense to me it would be able to divide itself in this way, especially given that there's apparently this in-between place that we're all in between lives where we get to make decisions and choices about how our next life is going to be. So then
yeah.
in that space, I'm sure we could explore other options, such as the one that you're talking about right now, right? Where the soul decides it wants more than one lived experience. Yeah, that is so interesting. I love all of this stuff. It's so much fun to explore these ideas.
I
Yeah,
know it. And it's so much fun to discover a whole new aspect like that. So I'd like to mention one more situation.
please.
It was a woman who came to me fairly recently, and she found in her regressions that she was an extraterrestrial being on another planet, and that they were in an underground facility, like with a big open space, but it happened to be underground. And there were quite a bunch of them, maybe 25 or so of these uh, people who were extraterrestrials, as she was. They were all the same type of extraterrestrial. And they were being trained in doing energy work. And the energy work would be applied in many, many different ways. Sometimes it would be applied for physical healing, or sometimes it would be applied for um, astral healing. In other words, the energetic body, what we consider the aura and the corona of a person or a being, any being, and they'd be doing that kind of work. So sort of physical and energetic on another person. It could be another extraterrestrial being of the same type or a different type, or of human beings. And they were being trained to use energy for other things too, like for uh, defending defending their group from anybody else who would want to attack or invade their group, or to go and help others who were being invaded, use their energy in that particular way, not necessarily with weapons. Although I think that some of the training they had batons that would light up, and that could be kind of used as a defensive weapon. But sometimes it was just a matter of how they would send energy from their bodies that would protect somebody else. Anyway, there were a, a variety of uses for the energy that they were being trained to do. And she said that she recognized in the regression that she had been with this group of beings for a very long time, she said. So I think that means even beyond this lifetime or before this lifetime, as well as many, many visits with them during this lifetime. And then part of this regression was that she and her group came up to the surface of the planet. She was sure it was a different planet, didn't look like Earth, and that in a depressed area, like almost like down in a valley, there was another group, a different type of beings, and they were being trained for something, but she didn't know really what they were being trained for. But she had the sense that that was an ongoing group that had been together for a very long time, and they were being trained in whatever their purpose was going to be. But it was definite that she was not a human, and her group were not humans. But they had been together, and they were very benevolent beings in whatever their work was going to do. Well, one of the things they were going to do with their energy, they were being trained to do, is to help things grow better, help plants grow faster, sturdier, healthier, more nutritious,
Love
which I
that.
thought was really nice. It would be nice if we had a means to do that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Also kind of reminding me a little bit of what you were saying a couple of minutes ago about how they were using energy as a form of healing to help others. It reminded me of, out of the blue, Ray Hernandez's experience, his and his wife's experience with their dog.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, if anybody's catching on to this, if you don't know about Ray Hernandez, he has written a series of incredible books. He's one of the founding members of the Free organization, and he was living quite a normal life, like everyone who has these experiences. Almost everyone has had this happen. Didn't particularly believe in anything, and then boom, had these extraordinary experiences, one of which was his dog being healed by this being or this ball of light. I honestly can't remember the specifics. I wish I could. But
It
yeah,
was from a UFO. It was
thank
from a different realm of beings. Yes.
yes. And so that's what they were doing, right? They were using this energy to heal the dog and also prove to him and the wife that they were real and this was real. So yeah.
Yes. That made such an impression on him, Ray Hernandez, that I mean, he just completely dove in with great conviction and dedication to bringing out more and more about the UFO reality and the extraterrestrial reality.
Mhm.
Yes.
It's quite amazing, these stories. I mean, they sound so, to somebody who's not used to them. Because like sometimes I'm able to put myself into the perspective of someone who may be listening to this and is new to this kind of information, how it must be all kinds of things. It must sound bizarre and far-fetched and exciting and intriguing and all kinds of different things. It really is extraordinary. And here we are also in this week having just received well, I want to say proof, but I'm holding off on that a little bit for the moment. But this huge whistleblower account that Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal have shared through the debrief on Monday, June 5th, about
Mm.
the U.S. actually having retrieved alien, so-called alien craft and bodies. And there's yet more evidence to come out from that, but it has blown Twitter upside down, and people are really starting to catch on to the fact that these beings are real and our governments know it. And people like you have been saying this for so long, Barbara. So these stories are so fascinating and so enriching. And I love how they make me feel about life in general, that life is just so much bigger and so much more than we think that it is.
Oh, yes. And multidimensional. I mean, that's something that I certainly had no awareness of whatsoever until maybe the last 20 years or so. And, I mean, I just never thought in those terms.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I assumed that we were all physical, bodies, and yes, we had souls, but that was it. But I mean, now we realize that many people leave their bodies, you
Mhm.
know, outer body experiences, astral travel, and and then now we're beginning to realize even more, as we're talking about today, that sometimes we can be here on Earth, or maybe primarily we are. It seems that way, doesn't it?
Yes.
And sometimes we are elsewhere on another part of the universe, or in a different dimension, being just as conscious and aware and actually very actively doing things.
Makes
So,
sense to me.
yep. And there's probably even more that we're going to be learning. Who knows?
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. I'm really excited that more and more of these stories are being shared. And of course, we stand on the shoulders of giants, Barbara, and you are definitely one of them. People of your generation who've been doing so many different things to spread the word about this for so long. And of course, it's been very slow, glacial process in terms of the wider, population finding out that this is for real. And so it's wonderful to be able to have this conversation with you at this time in our history as humans also.
Yeah. Well, I always feel that people incarnate, or let's say it this way, the soul incarnates for a purpose.
Mhm.
And it might be a very mundane purpose, like just learning how to get along with people, or learning how to resolve a conflict with the person who was your father in a previous life, or
Mhm.
just how to be more patient, or whatever, you know. And then sometimes I think the soul incarnates to really learn a lot, or really to open up for people. So I think my soul must have chosen to really learn a lot, things that I never had learned about in previous lifetimes.
I guess so, Barbara, because here we are on episode number 10, and we're not even, I don't think we've even really gone that far into the multitude of experiences that you have had. So
No,
I'm
we
looking
need
forward to
more.
the next one and more.
Yep.
Yes. There's more coming, which is great. So I think, are we finished for now? Do you have anything else that you'd like to say? Okay.
No, I think that's fine.
Okay, great. I mean, amazing. You've given our audience a lot to think about. And, I was thinking about while you were speaking, I was connecting to concepts like NDEs, in terms of how the body is lying there on the table in, let's say, an ER department on a bed, and the mind is up in the corner of the room looking down and observing everything. And then when it comes back into the body and the body wakes up, that person is able to say word for word conversations that occurred, people who came in and out of the room, things that happened while they were apparently dead or out. So I think, as you were saying, there's these so many examples of how our consciousness really works, and the fact that we have such a limited understanding of that, yet are living at a time where we're able to, we have opportunity to learn that it's so much more, is really exciting. And you're making a wonderful
Oh,
contribution to
yes.
that.
Right. And speaking of the near-death experiences, you know, many people not only go to the corner of the room, but they go up into the spirit realm
Yep.
a
Yep.
while they're medically being pronounced dead. I mean, that's a whole other dimension. And they come back with vivid awarenesses of that whole realm,
Mhm.
um, which they maybe never believed in before or never even heard of. And yet here they experience it in such vividness that they're absolutely convinced this is real,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know. Then they come back and resume their life here, but they've brought back that enormous perspective with them,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the great reassurance that when we die, that's where we will go, into that realm light and unconditional love and beauty and learning and freedom, and no more pains or ills because we don't have a body, a
Yeah.
physical body. So it sounds great. And I mean, that's a great example. So since we are able to do that, and we do that after we physically die, when we leave these physical bodies, so why would it not be that we can leave these bodies and have a very full experience while we're still living in this body?
Yep.
We can leave it and come back to it, right? And be conscious of being here and being conscious when we are there.
Yeah.
And I think right now it's wonderful that we are able to have the link between our existence here in our bodies, in our lives, and that we also, on occasion, are somewhere else and not in this body, but still very much involved in whatever we're doing, and even as another being.
I love that. I love that. I love that, Barbara. That's really inspiring and really exciting to think about. And it is, as you said, actually happening. There's more and more evidence to that
Yes.
point. And I mean, you certainly have the data from the multitudes of sessions you've done over many years. So let's leave our audience with that last thought that you just beautifully articulated. And thank you, as always, Barbara, for having these conversations with me. And I'm looking forward to next time already.
So am I, and thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Bye for now. We will see you again next week with Barbara School number 11.
Okay.